Hello, I'm Billy Stewart, Assistant Pastor here at Solid Rock Tabernacle, 1325 Rudy Road in Alma, Arkansas. I want to welcome you to the broadcast and extend this personal invitation to you to come and join us in one of our exciting Spirit-filled services. Our Sunday school begins at 9 a.m. Our Sunday morning worship begins at 10 a.m. Our Sunday evening worship begins at 6 p.m. And we have an exciting Wednesday evening Bible study that begins at 7 p.m. We are taking a journey through the Bible, book by book, chapter by chapter, and verse by verse. Join us, won't you? Solid Rock Tabernacle, 1325 Rudy Road in Alma, Arkansas. It's church the way that it should be. Hey, I'll save a seat just for you. And now, let's join our service already in progress.
The 7 years, the 7 weeks of 7 years, each one, and the year of Jubilee. Okay, we're starting to ring bells now. Ding, ding, ding. Okay, good.
I said yeah, but I wouldn't.
So that's what we're gonna. That's where we left off. Was we were talking about going up to the year of Jubilee. Remember, you had 6 years, and then the 7th year was a Sabbath year for the land, or Shemitah for the land, and then after 49 years, there was 2 years that were Sabbath, the regular Shemitah on the 49th year. Then the 50th year was the year of Jubilee, which is another year of. So that's kind of where we are right now. Let's look at Leviticus chapter 25 is where we're at. We're going to be at verse number 13. Of this Jubilee ye shall return every man unto his possession. And if thou sell aught unto thy neighbor, or buyest aught of thy neighbor's hand, ye shall not oppress one another. According to the number of years after the Jubilee thou shalt buy of thy neighbor, and according unto the number of years of the fruits he shall sell unto thee. According to the multitude of years thou shalt increase the price thereof, and according to the fewness of years thou shalt diminish the price of it. For according to the number of years of the fruits doth he sell unto thee. Ye shall not therefore oppress one another, but thou shalt fear thy God, for I am the Lord your God. Okay, that's all pretty self-explanatory, right? So what is
Just that last part.
Yeah.
So it's basically explaining inflation of prices.
Not really, okay? Basically, when Israel comes into the promised land, now remember, the Jubilee, that doesn't start until they go into the promised land, all right? The Sabbath of years doesn't start until they go into the promised land, which they are not in yet. They're not in the promised land yet. They're still in Mount Sinai. So they're still there. They're not there. But when they do come into the promised land, the land was allotted according to the tribes and the families. So when they come to the promised land, these initial tracts of land would be divided amongst all the tribes, the 12 tribes. So each one would get their own little section of land. Kind of like each one would get their own state. Then within that state, each family would get, or clan would get, a certain amount. All right? So it'd be kind of like the counties within there. So yes.
Today, do the 12 land
No. No, everything's just all Israel right now. The land isn't divided into the 12 tribes anymore. Okay? But these initial tracts of land would be permanent possessions for those families. All right? And therefore, the land in Israel could never be permanently sold. So since it couldn't be permanently sold, that means it could only be leased. So they could lease land to other peoples. And the amount of the lease, that they would charge on this lease would be based on the number of years which were left until the Jubilee. Because once the Jubilee came, it all went back to the original people. So if they had 1 year left before Jubilee, then the rent's not going to be, the lease is not going to be as much as if they had 47 years left to the Jubilee. Okay? So it was based on how many years they had before they came to Jubilee. Now in Joshua 13 and 21, the promised land was divided among the tribes of Israel. And each tribe received an area within the land. And each clan or large family unit of the tribes received a portion within that land. The assignments that were returned each year at the year of Jubilee. So everybody knew what portion of land that they had. And if they leased it out, again, couldn't permanently sell it. They couldn't sell the land. So if the land got taken over by somebody else or leased out or whatever from somebody else, then got that land back. So everybody, every 50 years, people got to start all over again. Yes?
Did that still happen when the Romans took over?
No, it did not. They still have a year of Jubilee, but it wasn't. By the time the Romans took over, they didn't have, the tribes weren't divided up. The land wasn't divided up in the tribes. Now, what God gave the clan or large family unit in Joshua 13 and 21 was to be theirs forever. It was intended to be theirs forever. That meant that no family would be forever without land. That was the intention. So every 50 years, every family would have the opportunity to start all over again. And though this was a extremely charitable and helpful system. Now there are people that are today that push for the social. Well, even Israel in that they were not socialists at all. Okay? And this was not a socialist system because only the land was redistributed. And most effectively, this helped to protect against the existence of a permanent underclass in Israel. So in other words, you didn't have everybody be in the upper class and only the upper class had land, right? And the poor people were permanently poor. It was meant to avoid that, okay? Now we don't know for that the year of Jubilee was ever actually observed when they came into the Promised Land. Because remember, they got this, and it was another 40 years before they came into the Promised Land. So we don't know for sure. There are some, there is some alluding to this in Jeremiah. A few other places there is some alluding to it, but we don't know for sure that it ever actually really happened. Yet, to whatever degree that it was observed, this system was a blessing to Israel in the ancient world. Okay? Because it meant that no clan or any large family unit was forever poor. It was a reset in the economy of Israel. Everything went back to the way it was. In other words, debts were canceled, servants were liberated, the return of the land, okay? The economy of Israel under God's law, including the law of Jubilee, found a middle course between unrestrained capitalism and the oppression of state-controlled economy. Okay? So there was a happy medium in there, and it was not a socialist type of thing. Okay? Hey, some of the principles of Jubilee, all right, just some of the principles of it would be a blessing in the modern world. All right, okay? Such as the system of cancellation of debt every 50 years. How many would not like that? Ah, yes, I'll have a, yes.
So it made it to where it couldn't be fully capitalistic and it couldn't be fully communistic.
Well, basically, yeah. Couldn't become fully state run, okay? So, yeah, so it would be great to have a cancellation of debt every 50 years, you know, because every 49th year I'd be running up them credit cards. Max them puppies out because, you know, in a few months they're going to get canceled anyway. No, wouldn't do that. Did not assign land people across the globe as he did in Joshua 13 to 21 for Israel. We cannot take every principle of a jubilee and apply it to a modern world. Okay? Because that land that was given was the land that God gave them. Not land that people bought, not land that people conquered or anything else. It was land that God gave them. So God says, this is your land. And every 50 years, you and your family are going to get that land again. And if you had 50 acres and you had one left at the end of 49 years, on the 50th year, you got your 50 acres again. Yes.
I feel like if that was like a modern world thing, then there'd be a lot of problems with it.
Yeah, you can't do it because it's not set up the same way. Okay? The world isn't set up the same way now. And like I said, some of the principles of Jubilee would be nice. Okay? And even in Israel, some of them are actually still observed, but not all of them, and not to the extent that they may or may not have been observed in this time. Okay? All right. Verses 18 to 22. Wherefore ye shall do my statutes and keep and do them, and ye shall dwell in the land in safety. And dwell in its say, what shall we eat the 7th year? No, nor gather in our come in, ye shall eat of the old store. So God promised here that if Israel would simply obey them, that he would provide so much for them in the 6th year. Because remember, on the 7th year, no sowing, no planting, no harvesting, anything else. 7th year, the land rested. So he said that if you'll follow my commandments, I will give you so much on the 6th year that it will not only for the 7th year, when the land got its rest and you're supposed to let it rest, you would also be eating of the produce of the 6th year 3 years later. So not only am I going to provide for you for that 6th year, I'm going to do the 7th year, 8th year, and the 9th year. You're going to be able to eat on this that you got from the 6th year until the 9th year.
If only we could do that now.
Yeah, you know. And that was every 6 years. So half of the time, they were able to eat from what the 6th year of the last cycle. Right? So they were able to maintain an abundance. Right? And if Israel trusted God to provide as he promised that he would provide, then God promised to command a blessing on them. Not just say, yeah, I'm going to give you, but he says, I'm going to command a blessing upon you. The promise was so sure that God said he would command it to happen. Okay? And if God commands it, You can be pretty much well sure that it's going to happen. Right? So all they had to do was follow what God told them to do. And then he would command that blessing upon them. Right? Leviticus 25:23. The land shall not be sold forever, and the land is mine, for ye are strangers and me. So the whole world belongs to God. Psalms 24:1 tells us that the whole world belongs to God. Yet God has a special regard for the land of Israel. Right? He calls it his holy land in Zechariah 2:12. Right? And here God has promised that the land of Israel is his, but it's his in a very special way. Beyond the sense in which all the earth belongs to him, Israel belongs to him in an even more special way. So in theory, when you think about it, God could have chosen any nation that he wanted to. But God's chosen nation and the drama of redemption could have been centered almost anywhere on the globe. It could have been centered right here in the United States, okay, or North America. It could have been centered in Europe. It could have been centered in China. Okay? It could have been centered anywhere in the world. Yet he chose the land of Israel as that place. Now, in terms of geography, it is the stage upon which God has centered his plan for all the ages. Everything is going to be centered around Israel because God, the promised land, belonged to God in a special, special way. Okay? We see that all throughout the Bible. The land of Israel has a special place. In Revelation, Israel is the focal point of everything when you start getting into Revelation and looking at it. The entire focal point with Revelation, the Antichrist, everything is focused around Israel. The temple has to be rebuilt. Okay? Which is going to happen where? In Jerusalem, in Israel. The temple's going to be rebuilt. The temple has to be rebuilt. Okay? The Antichrist is going to defile the temple, which is in Israel. The world is going to go to war against who? Israel. Everything is going to be focused on Israel. When Jesus comes back, he's not coming back to Alma, Arkansas. He's coming back in Israel. That's where he's going to be seen first. Okay? So it's going to happen. Everything, the entire focus of all of God's redemption plan was Israel. Jesus came to Israel. He could have come to Egypt. Could have come to just about anywhere, but he came to Israel. All right? So the land belonged to God in a special sense. And that land could be leased, but it could never be sold. Okay? And then every lease that they had would expire on the year of Jubilee. In addition, the lease could be bought out at any time. So in other words, normally people would lease the land. They wouldn't sell it, but they would lease the land because a reason that some of us may sell land. We need money for some reason. Okay? So we would sell the land. Well, they couldn't sell it, so they would lease it because they need money. Now, what could happen is if the lease that they gave somebody, and they said, okay, it's going to be so much because it's so many years to Jubilee. But somebody could come in, this what they call a kinsman redeemer, which we see in Leviticus 25:25. He could come in and redeem that land himself. He could buy back the lease, basically. Who was related to that person that that the land belonged to could come back and buy that lease. Now, one could say that the promised land never truly belonged to Israel. It belonged to God, of course. And in this, God would remind Israel that their real home was heaven with him. Okay? This was just a passing through point. Okay? They were only strangers and visitors in the land. And this is true of Christianity today, isn't it? We are told that we are just strangers and sojourners in the land. Okay? Just passing through. Now, this doesn't sound like a blessing, but for God to tell us that we are strangers and sojourners with him, not ourselves, but with him, we're strangers and sojourners with him, that changes everything. Because to be with God means all those things are ours. And we have a far better citizenship and homeland than here on earth. Okay? That's just it. We're here, but we're just passing through. We're just, if you're setting up for this to be your only home, you're looking at the wrong place. Okay? Yeah. Again, I've said it many times. These people that come up and say, live your best life now. No, I don't want to live my best life now. My best life's going to be the next one, not this one. Because this is just, I'm just passing through. I'm here because I have to be here right now. Yeah. But I'm going to a place. And Jesus says that if he goes, that he goes to prepare a place for us. Now just think about that. Jesus said he goes to prepare a place for us. He's been working 2,000 years on preparing a place for us. Think about how wonderful that's going to be, because it only took him 6 days to create everything in the universe. And yet he's taken 2,000 years to make a place for us. Wow, that place has got to be pretty good. Okay? So we have a far better citizenship than this place. Okay? And I'd be willing to give up this citizenship down here by all means to get that citizenship there. Okay. Verse 12. And ye shall grant a redemption for the land. If thy brother be waxen poor, and hath sold away some of his possession, and if any of his kin come to redeem it, then shall he redeem that which his brother sold. And if the man hath none to redeem it, and himself be able to redeem it, then let him count the years of the sale thereof, and restore the overplus unto the man to whom he sold it, and he may return unto his possession. But if he not be able to restore it to him, then that which is sold shall remain in the hand of him that bought it until the year of Jubilee. And in the Jubilee it shall go out, and he shall return unto his possession. So the redemption of the land was accomplished through a redeeming relative. Okay? It was the kinsman redeemer. Now, the Hebrew word for this is goel. And it's actually pronounced Gael, but it looks, when you write it in English, it looks like Goel. All right. This was a designated close relative. It was somebody who was close to the family, had kin to the family. And he had the right and actually the responsibility to do three essential things for a clan or a family. One of them was redeem a family member sold into slavery. So if a family member was sold into slavery for some reason, it was his job to go redeem that person and bring them out of slavery. All right? It was his job to redeem the family's land or inheritance sold outside the family. Okay? Land leased outside the family, possessions that were sold outside the family. And it was also his job to avenge the murder of a member of the family. Okay? So when you look at it, the Gaal was a wonderful picture of Jesus. Jesus is our redeeming relative. Okay? Yes.
So they had a very high like place for those kind of people.
Well, those people just had a very high responsibility. Yes. Okay? So Jesus was our redeeming relative. Jesus redeemed us from the slavery of sin. Romans 3:24, 1 Corinthians 6:20. Jesus restores our inheritance and so much more. Jesus avenges the soul murder of his people, defeating the one who came to kill us. John 10:10. So when the Goel bought, the price was determined by how many years stood since its sale, since it was bought, and the next Jubilee. So the more years that it was between the time that it was sold and the time of the Jubilee, then the more expensive the price was. Okay? If this redeeming relative was unable to buy his brother or whoever out of debt before the Jubilee, then the land would return to the debtor at the Jubilee year. This all would be the one that would go over there, and somebody who needs money, and he would lease or sell possessions. This redeeming relative would go in and say, okay, I'm going to buy it back. All right? If he wasn't able to buy it back, if the price was too much, it was too expensive, he said, I'm sorry, I can't do it. Then on the year of Jubilee, it was all returned to him anyway. Okay? He just didn't have to wait 50 years if he could be redeemed otherwise. All right? So, verses 29 to 34. And if a man sell a dwelling house in a walled city, then he may redeem it within a whole year after it is sold. Within a full year may he redeem it. And if it not be redeemed within the space of a full year, then the house that is in the walled city shall be established forever to him that bought it throughout his generations. It shall not go out in the Jubilee. But the house of the villages, which have no wall round about them, shall be counted as the field of the country. They may be redeemed, and they shall go out in the Jubilee. Notwithstanding the cities of the Levites and the houses of the cities of their possessions, may the Levites redeem at any time. If a man purchase of the Levites, then the house that was sold and the city of his possession shall go out in the Jubilee. For the houses of the cities of the Levites are their possession among the children of Israel. But the field of the suburbs of their cities may not be sold, for it is their perpetual possession. All right? So, the law of that was described in the previous verses, all right, did not apply to urban property. Didn't apply to property within the city, the walled city. It applied to the rural lands outside of the cities, which is actually where most of ancient Israel lived anyway. Because for them, the land that they lived on was more than just a place to live. It was a place that they earned their livelihood. Yeah, their farmland and stuff, where they raised their animals. That would be returned to them. But the house that was inside a walled city permanently belonged to whoever bought it. Now, when somebody bought the house within the city, they had 1 year to redeem it. They could go back anytime within that year and say, hey, I want to buy the house back. And the person had to sell it back. But after that 1 year period of time, sorry, it's that person that. Right? So they had 1 year to redeem it after that. In the cities, usually only a place to live. That's all they did. People didn't make a living out of their homes, right? So it was only a place for them to go and live their life. Therefore, the property could be bought and sold more freely than the property in the urban or the rural areas, without the same restrictions that applied to the original allotments of the land given to Israel. However, there was an exception to the special rules of urban real estate. Would be theirs forever. So if you were a Levite, it was yours always. It could be redeemed at any time, whether it was in the city or in the country. It didn't matter. If it belonged to a Levite, the Levite could go down after 20 years and say, hey, I want my house back. And they had to sell them the house back. Okay? But it was only Levites that could do that. Nobody else could. All right, verses 35 to 38. Take thou I specifically prohibit making money from the misfortune of a poor brother. In other words, if your brother or anyone says, hey, man, I'm broke, I need some money. Yeah, okay. I'll loan you some money at 10% interest. Okay? Do that. You can't take advantage of that person. Okay? You couldn't make any money off it. But instead of making a profit from a poor brother, and that command was help him. Simply help him. Jesus made a similar command in Luke 6:34. It was when he asked, what credit could it be to us if we give to or help only those whom we know can help us back? What good is it? What good does it do to do us if we help somebody only because we know they can help us back? to give money to somebody only because we know they can give us money and more money back with interest.
We won't be blessed because we're not making it's not a hardship.
Yeah. So it is, Jesus commands us to do that. He said, it's not doing you any good. It's not any kind of blessing to you because you're helping somebody that you know is going to help you back.
Almost sounds a little selfish.
Yeah, it is. I'm only going to help you if you can do something for me. Yeah.
How the world is.
That's how the world is, yeah. But God's kindness and generosity to Israel was an example of the type of kindness and generosity that they were to show to others. God said, hey, I'm not charging you. I'm giving you this land, and I'm not charging you for it, and it's yours forever. So, you gotta. Okay? All right, verses. I brought forth him with rigor, but shall fear the Lord, fear thy God. Both thy bond and thy bondmaids, which thou shalt have, shall be of the heathen and that are round about you, and of them shall ye buy bondmen and bondsmaids. Moreover, of the children of the strangers that do sojourn among you, and them shall ye buy, and of their families that are with you, which they begat in your land, and they shall be your possession. And ye shall take them as an inheritance for your children after you, to inherit them for a possession. They shall be your bondmen forever. But over your brethren, the children of Israel, ye shall not rule over another with rigor. So it was pretty normal in the ancient world for someone that was in life-threatening poverty. They were so poor that, chance that they would starve to death, or were unable to pay their debts in some way. It was not unusual for them to become slaves. Now, the law of Moses would not allow an Israelite to do this for one of his brethren. Okay? He was not able to be regarded as a slave. He was a hired servant and a sojourner. Okay? And though it is almost impossible for us to relate to this in the modern world, this kind of slavery was actually necessary and kind of helpful, actually, in the ancient world. For most of humanity's existence, the poorest people were sometimes confronted with the choice between death by starvation or becoming a slave.
You can see it in China.
Yeah.
China's basically doing that.
But yeah, it still happens today. And in such circumstances, it is hard to call slavery good in any way, but it was certainly preferred to the alternative, which was death. Okay? The Hebrew word translated for slave here can more accurately subordinate person, someone that is under the authority of another person that is above him in the hierarchy. It's kind of like in the military, enlisted people are subordinate to officers. Lower ranking officers are subordinate to higher ranking officers. Lower ranking enlisted is subordinate to higher ranking. It's the same thing, okay? It's the same thing at work. Even people who go to work, you are subordinate to somebody else. Somebody everybody's got a boss, okay? So you are subordinate to that person. This is saying that it's not, you're not really the person, the Israelite was not a slave per se. He was a hired person, basically. And he would work until his debt was paid off. And once his debt was paid off, he was released from that burden. He was regarded as a hired servant. And he could be released from his obligation, as I said, when his debt was paid. But every hired servant was released at the year of Jubilee. So if somebody was in debt and they became a hired servant, the Hebrew word there is Ivad, if they became that hired servant that was kind of like a slave, that they could be, once that debt was paid, they could be released. You say, okay, fine, you paid your debt, you're out of here.
What if they didn't?
Or if they didn't, then they stayed there until the year of Jubilee. They were released. Everybody was released.
Even if they didn't get released?
Even if the debt wasn't paid, because the debt was relieved. So they were allowed to go. Okay? Now God commanded that slaves and workers should not be mistreated. They had to be treated well. Okay? They weren't to be worked excessively. Okay? And they weren't to be worked to where it was going to hurt them, to their harm. God cares about working conditions. And he does not want workers mistreated in their labor. Yes?
I feel like that dwindled over the years and eventually led to the slavery that most people know.
Yeah.
Brutal slavery.
Yeah, it's not the same kind of slavery that we look at. Okay? For debt or from poverty didn't have the same rights as the Israelites, though. Okay? What they went into servitude for life, okay? Assuming their debt or obligation was never paid. But they still had to be treated humanely. Okay? Now, there are those in the world who will say that the Bible condones slavery. Now, the Bible is talking about slavery. We shouldn't. The Bible said it was okay to have slavery, and therefore, because the Bible says that it was okay to have slavery, the Bible is immoral. But there is a distinct difference between slavery, as was commonly practiced in the past few hundred years, and the slavery by the Bible. Okay? In Exodus 21:16, it specifically says that kidnapping a man to sell was a sin. And it was not allowed in Israel. And most slavery, both ancient and modern, was kidnapping. Because these people were taken from their lands and they were taken over and imprisoned the person against their will and would sell them into slavery. But when it was regulated as it was regulated in the Bible, slavery was actually entered into willingly. These people did it because they wanted to do it. They had a choice. They didn't want to die, but yes. But even though they entered into it as a choice, they were still treated humanely. Right? an Israelite could, if you got a foreign one, a foreign person, then that person was there. But still, he was your slave forever. But still, he had to be treated humanely. There are a lot of examples where slaves were released. Josephus talks about it. There's a few of them in the Bible where slaves were allowed to be released, and they said, "No, I want to stay," because they were treated so well. They were like, "Hey, I'm getting 3 hots and a cot and all this other stuff. I might as well just stay here. You know, I can't do this good out of my own. I'll stay right here." Okay. All right, Leviticus 25, 7:55. And if a sojourner or behind a be not redeemed in these years, for unto me the children of my servants, whom I Israelite, who is forced to sell himself to a foreigner because of debt, whatever it is. Okay. And this foreigner may not respect his rights as an Israelite under God's law. Okay? But as in the redemption of land, a kinsman redeemer, a Gaal, was responsible to buy the Hebrew slave out of servitude if he could. Right? And the price was reckoned in relation to the year of Jubilee, once again. But if he could not be redeemed earlier, he was to be released in the year of Jubilee. Okay? So God's care for Israel and for their redemption was based on the idea that they were first servants to the Lord, servants to their covenant God, not service to anyone else. Okay? So they had to, in order to do that, they did everything they possibly could to keep those people. You know, if you had to be sold to a foreigner, they did everything they could to buy you back, and then you would be in servitude to whoever. Okay? All right, that brings us to the end of chapter 25. Any questions, comments, concerns, amens, oh me's?
That story goes along about the prodigal son.
Uh-huh. Yep. Yep. Now, we've only got 2 more chapters left in Leviticus, as a matter of fact. Whoop, whoop. Woo, woo. Can I get a woo, woo? So we've only got 2 more chapters left in Leviticus, and then we'll get into Numbers, and there will be some, we will kind of skip around in Numbers some, because there's a lot of stuff, like when it comes to the census and all of that, that's just, it's just telling about how many, how many soldiers each tribe could provide and all that stuff that is really kind of, there's not much commentary on it. It's self-explanatory, and it is really kind of boring. So it's not something. When it starts coming to the begats, we're not going to worry too much about those, unless there's something in the begats that we really need to look at, then to understand who is.
Thank you for joining us today. We pray you were blessed by the broadcast. If you have a prayer request or questions about Solid Rock Tabernacle, please visit our website at www.solidrocktabernacle.org. That's www.solidrocktabernacle.org. On behalf of the pastors and congregation here at Solid Rock Tabernacle, we pray you have a blessed week, and we invite you to join us in person or on one of our future broadcasts.